Good evening and welcome to Omnibus Roundtable Television Show. I'm your host, Wanda Carter, and this evening we're going to celebrate Christmas, Kwanzaa, and all of the wonderful events that take place in this season. But before we get started and bring you this wonderful show, let me introduce you to our magnificent panel. Starting to my left, we have Miss.
Well, I am Naima Latif, and as always, glad to be here with you.
Thank you, Naima, and later on you tell us a little bit about some of the books you wrote.
Absolutely.
All right.
And I'm Roxy Williams. It's good to be back on a holiday season that's festive and full of fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now we're going to take you to our very special guest who's been doing sign language ever since I've known him, and when my husband was here, and we're saluting him, by the way, as well, this evening, Mr. Donald Bester was our signer. And so welcome, Reverend. How are you?
I'm fine, Wanda. Thank you, ladies.
Oh, excellent, excellent. And tonight we're going to be talking about things that don't concern you.
Or being concerned about things that don't concern you.
Okay, okay. And so we're going to let Reverend tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll join in the conversation. So, tell us what this topic is all about to you.
What it means to me, Wanda and ladies, is that there's so many things that happen in Chicago that involve hearing people, but we never think about the deaf who are included in the city of Chicago.
Okay.
And there's so many things. That's why I came with the title, Being Concerned About Something That Don't Concern You. Because there's many things. You guys can think about it. And I can give you examples of how most of the things that happen in the city of Chicago really don't have anything to do with the deaf and the impaired.
Give me some examples so we can, because I can kind of envision some things that might go on, like the celebrations. I mean, you know, just having wheelchair access, or having somebody doing signing like you're doing when they're talking for people who can't
Right. And
hear.
I'm very interested to know from the church point of view as how many deaf people we have in a population or a congregation of people where this would be a service that is of benefit to them and of benefit to the greater communication to our people.
That is interesting, the church.
Absolutely.
You know, because they be filled every Sunday with a lot of people, and probably
Absolutely.
you might have
a
few that can't speak.
Well, I remember a service I went to in Atlanta, and they had signers, which was really fascinating. I was enjoying it. And they almost did like music, you know. They had the movements that were rhythmic, going along with the organ playing and
really?
the choir. They signed the choir songs as well as the pastor's sermon.
Really?
And when he was dramatic, they would be dramatic. So it was really fascinating because it reflected the mood of the sounds, so that those who couldn't hear could feel what was going on.
That's excellent.
And see, we're living in a time where we're looking at higher levels of diversity. I mean, I'm in a church where that speaking Spanish is almost the second language.
Yes.
But I really enjoyed the topic we're going to discuss today, is being concerned about something that doesn't concern you, because where have we dropped the ball that we've let this population, we have handicapped, we make seats accessible and facilities for them, but again, no one really pays attention to the deaf, and I think it's well worth discussing. Why is it that we have left them out?
Well, one question I have, because I think you do American Sign Language for the deaf, right?
Yes.
Does that include other languages like Spanish? Say, like Roxy was talking about, you've got a multilingual population. What about another language, Spanish? How is that signed?
Well, in Spanish, if the person is from America, from here in the city, it's the same. But if they from Spain, then it's different. It's a big difference.
Right.
But you catch the drift of what's going on. But the language is totally different if they're from that country.
Right.
So if they're from
If they're
America,
from another country, if
then
they're
the
from
signs
America,
are the same.
it's the same thing.
And you
but
just
there's
spell out
different
words
because
in
what
Spanish.
happened, it's a cultural sign. We have people, black people in Chicago, who live up north, south, east, and west, who sound totally different.
Really?
Whoa,
Yeah.
really?
But it's a language all its
It's a
own.
language all its own, right? In the context of the language, it's
How
different.
did you get into signing?
I started signing when I was 12 years old.
Why?
A friend of mine, because he's deaf,
Okay.
and his family was deaf.
Oh,
And I'm a twin, and he's a twin.
really?
So
all
we just
became
grew up
friends.
together. His mother and father, they were deaf. His sister's now blind. And we just started communicating with that population, being friends.
Isn't
And it just happened.
That is wonderful.
awesome.
It's happened.
That's
It's natural.
awesome. Now,
So your friend Did his parents grow up signing? Did he learn
yes,
in,
they were deaf.
So he
They
learned
were
it in the
deaf.
house.
He learned in the house. It was a way of living through them.
Did
It
they
was just
actually have to be taught that, or was
Well, they went
he
to
got
school
me
for it.
doing
I
it?
know.
Wait, and I'm sitting here trying to hold myself so that I don't make a word that's not a word and say something
Or a
that I'm
bad
not really
word,
saying.
yeah.
I went to school,
So
but,
you got me under
but
control.
during that time, in the early 60s, they didn't have that many schools for the deaf
Absolutely.
in the black neighborhoods.
Right.
So
Okay.
his parents really taught him what he
So
wanted to
this
do.
was a black young man?
It's a black young man, right?
Wow.
But at one time, this population was looked at with a disability, and people really gave it its due respect. That we try to cater to the side of the disability. I'm still trying to find out at what point did we forget this population? Where did we drop the ball?
Media.
Media.
When media came in play, everything just dropped the ball.
Because everything was sound.
Everything was sound.
Sound.
Are there a number, from your perspective, how many high schools in Chicago?
You have three high schools. You have Whitney Young,
My
and you
alma
have
mater. Hello,
CVS,
Michelle Obama.
Chicago Vocational High School. Then the last one you have Farragut, and that's up north.
Right.
Now, Whitney Young has 99 deaf people in their school.
Wow.
Farragut has the most. They have, I think, 100, 100.
Wow.
Then CVS have about 65 to 70.
Wow.
Wow.
But then you have a lot of schools who have public schools where the kids are mainstream.
Got
They're
it.
in school where they have to join a program with other hearing kids, but they're not, all the kids not deaf.
Let me ask you this question. When we're talking about our young people, how is it that they're adjusting in this kind of this young, urban, trended society as a deaf person? Is it very difficult for them?
Yes, it's hard. Because what you have to look at is this. We grew up with our parents learning how to communicate with us. If your mother, father, sister, and brother cannot sign, then you don't know what's happening inside the world.
Oh, wow.
I can imagine now. What about the children that are in DCFS because they've been taken away from their families and placed with other families? How are those children that are deaf? How are they dealt with?
If that child that was taken from DCFS is placed with a hearing family, and that family is supposed to be mandated to learn how to communicate with that child, but many times they're not. They have what they call house signs.
Oh, wow.
Like if you see bread, the sign for bread is here.
Right.
They say bread. That's eat all day long.
Right.
Right.
So those are house signs. That's why I came with a program, and I didn't start it, but I started in the black community called homeschool.
Okay.
So I go to the parents' home
And you
with the
teach
child, and I teach the child so they can improve their signing skills.
That's excellent.
So-
Excellent.
But what about, like you were saying, parents that can hear and the child is deaf and the parents don't sign? I mean, if they don't learn it, because the child might learn it at school or wherever, but if the parents don't sign, how then do they communicate?
They don't.
And
House signs again. House signs.
So they make up their own,
They
basically.
make up their own signs.
'Cause
But
I-
in the outside world, it doesn't play.
Well, let me ask you this, and this is just a fundamental question. What type of funding has the government made available for services for this population of people? Because even if the mom doesn't sign or the brothers and sisters don't sign, you might be able to get maybe a service where that someone,
Can
like
come in.
respite care or what have
Right.
you, someone comes in.
Like
and
an
allows
interpreter or something like that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, it happens, but then what happens if the child is not involved in that program, like DCFS, Doors, Goodwill Industries,
Yes.
Envision, which was now formerly another program, then they won't get it. So the parents have to make themselves available to understand what's happening, because you're dealing with a special child.
That's right.
But,
That's
but
right.
and that's right where I want to go to the special needs division, because it just like you mandate a mother that has a crippled child or a child with a physical disability, they train them into how to care for their children. And I'm just wondering, are we equally exposing those mothers and fathers to that type of training so that they can properly
Right.
care for their children?
No, when a child is deaf, he's the lowest, that child is the lowest person on the totem pole, so to speak,
wow.
because wheelchair accessibility is open. Blind says, matter of fact, they have a thing where I was talking to a deaf person. I said, would you rather be blind or deaf? He said, I'd rather be deaf. He said, because when you're blind, you cut off from things. When you're deaf, you cut off from people.
Whoa, listen to this.
Wait,
What
now
about
run that by me again.
when you're
Blind,
blind?
you're
When
cut
you're
off from
blind,
things.
you cut off from
When
things.
you're deaf, you're cut
When
off
you're
from
deaf,
people.
you cut off from
And
people.
Because
sometimes that
nobody's
can be a blessing.
communicating. Nobody's communicating. But
communication.
what about all these kids that are, we know we have a large population of children that are homeless.
Yeah.
What about
they fit
those
in
kids?
those?
I mean, are they,
those
is there
numbers?
any kind of programming going on for those kids?
For homeless kids, yes. You have a lot of kids through the state that are
Right.
on programs open for homeless. But now, when you talk about homeless,
And
deaf.
Wanda, we looking at deaf kids. Look at deaf kids. There's a lot of kids right now go to all the 3 high schools I just named. Whitney Young,
Absolutely.
Farragut,
Right.
and CVS. They're deaf and they're homeless. See, homeless only means that you don't have a place to stay with your address.
Right.
Wow.
So a lot of kids go out to programs and shelters, but a lot of them tell me they'd rather stay in the streets or at a friend's house for 2 weeks here, then 2 weeks here, because when they go to shelters, they have nobody to communicate with them.
Wow.
So when they're at a friend's house, at least somebody
They need somebody
knows
care about them enough. They won't
Yes.
steal from them.
That's good. And you know, I was at a school where there was a child who, you know, had been categorized as a misbehaving child, a problem child, and they went through maybe like 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade before it was finally recognized that they had a hearing problem. And so once the hearing problem was corrected, then the behavior problem was
right,
corrected.
right,
But
right.
how many of our children are not diagnosed
That's
early
true.
enough to understand that the
That's
reason why
true.
they're misbehaving is because
And they
can't
probably
hear?
get failed over and
Yes.
over and over
Right. That's what
again
was happening with
without
this young
the
man.
real
Right.
problem, the
Being-
root
being
being addressed.
Right.
Right. It's so many of that happen. What happens now, you have a lot of kids right now. I work with domestic violence, and a lot of kids now are deaf. They're going through it.
Right.
And so what domestic violence, DV, now is really catapulting to the teenagers
Correct.
in the deaf community. And most deaf girls do not have deaf boyfriends.
Really?
They're
wow.
hearing boyfriend.
That's
But we want to
interesting.
fit.
Right.
We want to be fit. We want to be accepted. We want to be with. Now I say, well, how do you choose a boyfriend?
Right.
If he can't
It
hear.
would be a question
If he
I'd
can't
ask.
sign.
What about
Absolutely.
reading,
That is a
writing,
question,
and,
though.
and
How do you?
Arithmetic. I mean,
yeah,
how
how do they deal with that?
When you mean the deaf people?
Yeah.
Oh, they can do that.
And do they have special, you know, do they make accommodations within the high
They
schools
make high
for
school
them?
accommodations, but what happens that, okay, in CVS High School, school is real huge.
Yes.
They have deaf people on one end.
Oh, wow.
One
And
end?
they're isolated
They're
like
isolated.
that?
They're
Oh,
isolated.
wow.
So everybody knows that's
Everybody
the
knows
deaf
that's the deaf. So that's the deaf group
that's-
over there.
that's-
Yeah, and that's something that I definitely come against.
Yeah, I
the
don't like that myself.
segregation
That's
of
the
the
segregation, all of
population.
it.
like
So what can we say to the public today? Because we're gonna have you on an ongoing basis. Man, I'm gonna take you around the country because I think that people need to know what to do about this population of children, and not only children, adults.
Oh, you have
Well,
many-
see,
that's
I
another-
take issue when we say no child left behind. This is a population
A whole
of children
population
been left
that are
behind.
left behind. And
Yes.
who's responsible and accountable for that, legislators? Which ones of you will take this ball and begin to roll it, you know?
Yeah.
Well, does a lot have to do with when a person became deaf? Like if you're born deaf, of course, then your family knows how to
It's accepted,
adjust
right,
to you
right.
at an early
But
age.
again, I
But what
understand
if you
you're saying. If
go
you-
deaf
if you
later
go
on in
deaf,
life?
like 1973 through 77, when they had the boom boxes,
Yes, I bet people were
a
going
lot
deaf
of
then.
teenagers at that time went deaf.
Wow.
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 From having that thing
They
right up
have
to
that
their
thing on
ear.
Now this is
It
interesting.
said that that would happen. No,
Shoot, that make
listen
my
to
ear hurt, and I ain't even got it up to my.
When I tried to get the contract with juvenile court back in the early 80s, they were saying they didn't have any deaf kids. I'm thinking it's impossible because I've been a social worker for many years.
No,
And a lot of kids went to juvenile that were deaf.
Right.
When it happened, I finally got in juvenile court as a counselor for the deaf, teaching sign language. And they finally have a lot of kids that were deaf. What they would do is remove their hearing aids to be
Oh,
accepted and run through the program. Yeah.
Oh my
So-
goodness.
So what they do, they talk loud. Like if I'm talking to Rossi and I'm deaf, and she'll talk loud, but I can't hear her. I just look at her.
Right.
You know, I can't hear her.
I
She
think a
talk
lot of
loud.
people do that to
Yeah.
me naturally.
Right,
Yeah,
naturally.
so I
They
kinda
learn to
adjust
read
it.
lips.
They learn. Well, no, the average person learn how to read lips or hearing because you don't know A-I-O-U. You have to know the
Right.
vowels.
Vowels. Oh, wow.
So it's difficult for a deaf person to read lips. It's just like if you give a deaf person a dictionary and say, look it up, they'll look at you like, come on, give me a break. Can't even pronounce it.
Right.
Wow.
Let
I don't know what it
alone.
sounds like.
Absolutely.
That's so it's
So
a
it's
different way of learning.
Interesting.
It's a different way of learning, right.
They talk
And
about.
I think that they have so much to add to our young people as well. I mean, not just us knowing
Yeah.
it, but this is a population of young minds that could capture sign language and learn it to become bilingual, really.
Absolutely.
Because it is a language, I mean, it's just interesting to know the statistics of how many of our young people are suffering and some who are overcoming the challenge of being deaf and not really having a voice even after, you know, coming out of
Do you have a
different
handle
situations.
on the number of? I got
Well,
Yeah, I
okay, what I can
That's
say,
okay. Hey, eventually you're gonna be
Right.
actually saying some
what I can
words.
say is that
Doing.
what I can say in the city of Chicago, we have on 35% of the people in the city of Chicago are deaf, hearing impaired.
Well, that's a high
What?
percentage.
That's a high number.
35%.
35%.
That's a high percentage
That's
in a
large.
disabled
large.
category.
And they're officially
that we have
Yeah,
not
they're
hearing
deaf.
impaired.
They're deaf.
allotted funds and we have
Yeah.
not given real attention to assisting
We
this
oughta-
population.
We ought to write
It's
a
up
letter
to
to the president and tell him about it and see if he can start a social program.
Because we're being
for-
concerned about things that don't
Come
concern
on,
us.
we are. Come on.
And maybe it starts here. It's time for a new revolution.
Well, now the other question I have, because I had an aunt who, it was interesting. I think she had gone deaf. I think she was deaf at an early age. And her companion, both of them were not hearing, but they would take care of their young grandchild who could hear. So now how does that work? And you know, I'd come and visit sometimes, and they had the TV on, but they had the sound down. And this hearing child is watching this TV with no sound.
With
and
no
I'm thinking,
sound.
how is this?
Possible.
You know, and then when the child would come to our house, she would turn up the TV blasting. It's like, okay, this little girl who's like, was she 3, 4 years old? She was going crazy in this silent house because you know the two adults, they're signing each other, and she's
Wow.
excluded from the conversation.
How old was she?
She was like 3 years old at the time.
What happened many times, you have children who are deaf, children who are hearing from hearing parents. And if they learn how to sign, the mother, it's easy to teach a child that's hearing how to sign if you're deaf.
See, I think they had like what you said, home signs, because
Yeah,
they
yeah.
weren't using sign language,
Yeah,
but they
it's easy to
had
teach.
ways of communicating that was.
But when that
unique.
child get out in the real world, then he or she will see it's different.
Yes.
See, it's different. And like when you have, what I really dislike about it, I don't care we on TV, I'm gonna say it anyway, when white people come to our communities
Okay.
and work with our children,
Okay.
the signs are totally different.
Really?
Oh, now see, that's something that we
Totally
need to
different.
we need to bring
we
that
need to
out.
bring
It's totally
right.
different.
Totally
And
different.
let me ask, I
But that's
mean,
the-
just
wait a minute,
as
that's
a
just
fair
like-
question, you
yeah.
know, like when I learned Spanish, you know, I learned that there is a slang way
Yeah.
of
Yeah, there's
of
dialects of
now-
Spanish and everything,
absolutely.
just like with
and
our
so
language,
in
yeah.
sign, is there a
Same thing.
same
It's the same thing.
Slang.
Is it different dialects of
It's
sign
different
language? too?
slang, and it's different facial expression.
Wow.
Everything about sign is basically facial expression.
See,
body
because it's from a different culture.
From a different
So
culture.
they don't understand our culture, so they come into our community with their culture and
Absolutely.
try to
That's
teach our
interesting.
children the way that
Right.
they learn things.
I'm not going to mention the school, but the high school that I was teaching at, I was teaching a lecture there. Then the teachers, they were white, and someone was black, but they only know enough sign language just to teach a kid.
Right.
So students say, "Can you talk in ASL? That's American Sign Language." I start talking, and the teacher said, "What are you saying?"
Absolutely.
See?
That's
And that's
incredible.
sad. Now they're
So-
teaching
so
our
They're
children.
teaching our children, but they can't understand when the children break down and start talking street
Let
slang.
me, like, I
Wow.
heard you to say that you've been a social worker for some time, and so I don't think that any of the social ills that face our children are any different for this
No, same
population.
thing,
So
same
when
thing.
we find this population of people in trouble with drugs and gangs and, you know, the other issues that are facing our teens and developing adults, what kind of programs are invested to give them services that they need?
So what happens, you have a lot of programs right now, like the one I work with now, Healthcare Alternative Service. They deal with both the deaf and the hearing.
Okay.
A lot of agencies open their doors to that.
Absolutely.
Since I've been working with Congressman Danny Davis for a number of years, he opened up a lot of programs. But then you think about it, they have 2 deaf gangs that most people don't even know
Really?
about.
They have what?
What? What did you say?
deaf
Nerve to have a
gangs.
gang.
How
That's
did
crazy.
they? How did they?
Well, you have to think, what is a gang?
Okay.
A gang is
Organization.
nothing but right,
Right.
the alternative family.
That's right.
People you don't feel comfortable with in your
Oh
home. They're 2
wow!
deaf gangs.
Can you
Male
imagine
and
somebody
female.
walk up
Wow.
and say something to me
Yeah.
and I don't know what they say?
And the main thing,
I
they do the
gotta
same thing that any other gang member do. Same thing. They're in jail, they're in Cook County Jail. I
What
started.
happens when they're in Cook County Jail? Are programs
You don't even
like
want to
that?
know.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
You don't even want
And
to
so,
know.
Tell us anyway. I do
are
want to
we
know.
dealing with high levels of domestic violence?
Oh,
because
yes,
we
yes,
live in a
yes.
society that does not embrace disability well.
You know-
And this type of disability amongst people who don't quite understand
Are they
themselves, let
separated?
alone with other people, can be a compounded violence.
Are they separated in Cook County Jail or in
No,
prisons?
no. They're in the same.
In the
place.
general
population?
and they can't be
And they can't be
understood
understood
No,
or
can't be
heard.
can
I
they
want to get back to
speak?
Rossi's question. What happens first when you deal with domestic violence
Yes, sir.
in the death? A lot of women who are battered end up going back to the person that was beating them.
Are you
because
kidding
it's
me?
easier to think about. If I go to a program, I'm not going to mention names, if I go to a program where I'm receiving help as a victim, then where's my interpreter?
Wow.
There's
And your
only
interpreter
a
is
few
usually the person who's
black
battering you.
interpreters in the city of Chicago.
Only a few.
And we
Only a
need
few.
to be about the
Right.
business
Do you
of
teach
making that
people?
I
increase.
teach classes. I teach classes.
So people like us can work with other people.
So while people are out learning yoga
Yeah,
and
they could be
Pilates,
learning.
we can go learn American Sign Language and really make a difference in the lives of the
How
people
long does it
that
take to
are
learn?
around us.
We teach 8-week programs for
Oh, okay.
like 6-7 weeks. So you
And
can learn the
it's
basics.
and is this, are they paying you to teach this?
Yes, I get paid to do
So
this.
if we could start signing people up to come to your program, they
Sure.
can. Oh, let's get
Sure.
on it, ladies.
Absolutely.
Let's get
But
on
I
it.
have to iterate
Absolutely.
what you said, Roxy. What happens when a deaf woman is raped or beaten,
Oh, my.
battered through domestic
my.
violence, very seldom do they go to treatment programs for
Oh, my.
intervention because who's going to interpret?
Absolutely.
Then they very seldom go to shelters because in shelters, at least they can talk to somebody at home.
And they
feel
live in this
comfortable.
state of
They live in
silent
this silence.
frustration.
Sure.
With the handicap. This is incredible. I mean, because that's still a human mind that has gone through a traumatic situation that cannot speak for themselves and
Yeah.
they can't voice, what their feelings are if no one is there to, interpret or relay the feelings of that individual. That's incredible.
So is that the reason why a lot of times they get battered and abused because they can't speak and can't tell people what happened?
Sure. And see what happens is that a batterer would try to keep the woman who's deaf in his own surroundings because she get out with
she's under
outside friends to
control.
communicate. She can talk. She can say, hey, this is not right. But if she never been taught about domestic violence, you don't know about it.
But even there, when we're dealing with that, for her to be able to communicate who the batterer is, for her to be able
she'd
to
do that. She'd
communicate,
do that.
how she felt at the time that she was going through a
But you got to
traumatic.
think, if you go to court,
Yes,
you have to have an interpreter. That's one thing. But if the interpreter is not of your color,
right.
they
that's
don't understand
another
your
thing.
conversation. It's like,
Wow.
if you're up here, you can come down here.
Right, absolutely.
But you up here and can't come down here,
Absolutely.
you're not helping me.
And we need to cater to that. We need to customize.
What
our
about the
services.
people that get in trouble for whatever reason, go to court, and then get convicted for whatever?
A crime because they couldn't defend
you
themselves.
have
Can they-
an
is-
attorneys
is it-
that-
Is it somebody in court that is there an interpreter in the
Or a
case?
public defender?
Well,
are
you have
they?
to call for an interpreter. And if a lot of times the interpreter is of a different nationality. You don't understand your signs. Whereas if you're street, you can still understand what's happening. But certain words, diction, don't mean anything to you.
I mean, but this is totally incredible because they have the right to representation,
Sure.
and if the lawyers can't understand and speak it, they don't hire the service of an
Right.
interpreter. That person is really in serious and, critical
And there have been
condition.
people that have gotten convicted from crimes, people who had maybe mental disabilities, people who might have just
That's
had
a big
hearing
thing. That's a
impaired.
big
Right.
thing. The
Happen
And
mental
if, and if you
all the
can't,
time.
yes, and you can't express yourself or
Right.
defend yourself,
Right.
and you don't have a lawyer who will
That's
get you
right.
the interpreter that you need, then
Right.
you easily get convicted
Exactly.
for a crime.
And that
might not
happens
even know
quite
what's
frequently,
going
I
on.
believe.
I had a
that
young
happens.
lady once. She's a white young lady, and she took she had 3 kids, took them to a park district up north to get involved in activities in the park. And when she came back, one of the boys told me, she said, well, Mama, I'm gonna say his name was Jimmy. Jimmy sat down a whole while. And she said, why? Because they didn't have an interpreter. Jimmy was deaf.
Wow.
So she
So it
came
couldn't
back
even-
and she
it
asked
couldn't
the
even
person,
be
she
a
said,
part
well,
of the
why was my
discussion.
son sitting there? He said, we don't have an interpreter. She said, well, get one.
Right.
He said, hey, that's your problem.
Get out of here.
Sad.
That's your problem.
So how many people, I'd like to do research on that, to see how many people are in the prison systems, are in the school systems that are deaf. and do not have the proper interpreters to help them get their points across, to help them even learn how to communicate.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like a lost population.
Now, what
It's
about
like-
a hospital? When
Hospital,
you're
I'm glad
sick
you
and
said
you
that.
can't
I'm glad you said
explain
that.
what hurts.
What happened many times when I've done so many things, I've seen so many babies in my life through deaf women, and the woman said, well, would you like to have a female interpreter? No, I understand him.
Wow.
I don't care what he said, I just want to understand what you're doing to me.
Absolutely.
Wow.
You know? But then it comes
Absolutely.
to a terminology thing. You can interpret, but if you're not on a certain level where you can interpret terminology,
Absolutely.
then
It's
you
with
can't help
any
this
language.
woman, right?
It's
Any
with any
language.
language.
Right.
And that's what's really disturbing my spirit more than anything else
Right.
is to know that we have a silent population and they're living in a state of silent frustration.
Yes.
You know, when I was with
and
Reverend
no one
Meeks,
cares.
when I was with James, Reverend Meeks, we had a program there once. We had all men show up at the church, and we was trying to do support with the young boys. And there was over 115 men there, maybe 35 adults. And Reverend Meeks said, why don't you want these kids pick out a mentor you want to be with you? Maybe you can take you to work or just work with you on Saturday, Sunday, whatever. And one kid said, interpret for me, Reverend. He walked up in the front, he looked at him, and he said his name. Then he said, how many of y'all gonna help me?
Oh,
He got real quiet.
and that's incredible.
He said, it's over 300 of us out here.
Whoa!
That you can hear a pin drop.
And that's
Whoa!
And
Can
I'm-
you
I thought
imagine?
so and walked back and sat down.
So we need to set up some public forums and invite people out and let him do the signing
about it. Right,
and
talk
talk
about
about
it.
it and
Let's keep
encourage
talking.
people who are in that situation to come forward so that we can start to help them garner the kind of support that they need.
Right.
Because
to be productive citizens
right.
in our society.
We're
and make a
approaching the
difference.
end of our show, so we got like about 3 minutes, I think.
Well-
But I'd like for you to ask your question and then for you to close with whatever recommendations you have for our viewing audience.
Can you maybe show us some basic signs like hi, how are you? You know, basic, thing that we can all learn today while
Okay,
we're
basically what African Americans do all across the board is, what's happening?
What's happening?
What's happening?
What's
happening?
happening? What's
How
happening?
you doing?
What's happening?
How you doing?
What's
How
happening?
you
How you
doing?
doing? How you doing?
How you doing?
How you doing?
How you doing?
How you doing?
How you
Okay.
And response is fine.
Fine.
And not yet fine.
Fine.
here.
Oh,
Fine.
how you doing?
Fine. How you look? Fine.
No, this
How you look?
fine.
Oh,
Fine.
I gotta get that.
Fine. Ooh, I like that. Thank you, Naima.
It's great having you on this show.
Thank you.
It
Nice
is. We
meeting
ought to
you.
have you back because you know what? We've learned so much tonight, and there's so much more to be learned. And so, just get your phone ready because we're gonna be calling on you, inviting you out places, and especially churches,
Yes.
especially hospitals. And can we go into the prison system?
Oh yes, I'm in there already.
Oh.
Oh,
That'd be good.
can we follow you with the cameras?
Should- Well, that I don't know.
Yeah, you gotta get special permission
Yeah,
because the other people don't want everybody
Right,
knowing
I'm
they're
saying.
in there.
They're straight.
Yeah.
You better quit playing.
They don't want you to
I
know.
don't know about that. So
Yes.
That's deep. Well, thank you.